Welcome to the Grow Food Homestead Podcast. Today we are discussing how to transition to land through permaculture and homesteading skills with special guest Nicholas Burtner from the School of Permaculture. How are you doing today, Nicholas?
I'm doing strong. Thank you for asking. Yeah. How about yourself, Andres?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you very much for joining us today, for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know that, nowadays time is so valuable. Days seem to pass by in a second. So I really appreciate it,
Yeah.
man. So let's get right into it. And the theme of the call is, of course, permaculture related. So I want to get right into it in having the listeners understand what permaculture is. So that's exactly my first question is what is permaculture and how is it different from traditional agricultural and gardening techniques?
So permaculture is a very cloud word to define. And I've told many students there's thousands of different definitions of permaculture because everybody has a different take on it. So here's mine. There is a textbook answer. It's kind of wordy. Mine, I did my best to simplify it to a sentence or two. And it's a design system that works with nature to help you provide all of your living needs from and that's it, right? We can put a period on there, right? A design system that works with nature to help you provide all your living needs. And so then another question after that would be, well, what are my living needs? Right? We need community. We need to be around other people. We need food, water, shelter. In today's day and age, we need power often. Do we really need it? But we kind of do. And so permaculture does its best to mimic what the natural design is, or creation, or God's design that's already here, and work within those boundaries rather than what we currently do is like agriculture. Um, we'll take thousands of acres and mow everything down and plow the soil and think we're going to get good crops, but really what's happening is we're loosening the soil where it's going to either blow away or wash away, and it won't return. And the way the design system of nature was set up is we don't create soil as fast as we deplete it. So permaculture is one of the end goals is to create soil and do that in such a way that's harmonious with your everyday living. So yeah, there's a lot to it. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you for that. It's a great way of putting it because, as you mentioned, it's so true. There are so many ways of looking at what permaculture means, depending who you talk to. It can go many different ways. So I really like that it's a design system that works with nature to help you provide all your living needs. Awesome. I really like that, man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I really,
Thank you, by the
from the
way.
beginning,
Thank you. That makes me feel good that you like that definition. Yeah.
well, is if we could make things simple to understand, then that means that we actually know what we're talking about. If what we try to say is like sounds very complicated, it means that we probably don't really know it enough yet to be able to teach others. So the fact that you were able to put it in a very simple sense, it just goes to show your experience within permaculture. So I really appreciate it.
Mm.
And I myself, I'm learning. I know many different ways of growing food, but I'm definitely not an expert in permaculture. But one of the things that really stood out to me is the principles of permaculture, and one of them in particular, which is use small and slow solutions, is something that I really enjoy because in life we have big goals, but really we have to put them down into actionable steps, which are usually small and take a long time, right? And that goes with anything in life, rather whether it's business, health, in anything, you gotta always do it in the long term and small steps. So with that said, how can the 12 permaculture design principles help someone design their homestead or farm?
Good question, man. This is a good question. So I'll, let's back up and just look at the idea behind the word principle, right? So these are principles that help guide you, you know. And so with permaculture, we have like a prime directive. It's really kind of at the core. It's like in paraphrasing, it's to take responsibility for yourself and for your children and to do it now. And then we have the ethics. There's three ethics. And then after those ethics, we have design principles that help guide the design in. So your question is a good question, and I think the way to kind of look at this is two ways. Really simple answer is the principles just help give you a guideline on how to design, right? That's the simple answer. So you're designing something, but another layer to this, when you were saying start small, or small and slow solutions, that design principle from David Holmgren. Um, what we don't actually teach in permaculture design, what we don't actually teach, and it's not part of the curriculum, it's not part of the course, it's something that you naturally do on your own homestead, but when you're doing it for other people, it becomes abundantly clear how important it is to listen to that design principles, small and slow solutions. And the reason is, like, imagine building a house, and I'm in the middle of construction right now. Like you said, you have an end goal in mind, right? You have an end goal in mind, and you're wanting to hurry it up. Like, and let me tell you right now, it's getting cold here. I'm ready to hurry up and finish, right? Like I have goals, I want to hurry up, but I'm doing like I got to do the flooring next, right? One thing at a time, and inside the flooring, it's one panel at a time, one vinyl plank. I'm using vinyl plank flooring. So when you have a permaculture design, when we teach you how to do that in the permaculture design course, but then you have it and it's like, okay, well, what do you actually do with this? Where do you start first? And so those design principles some of them can be turned around into a plan of action, but that's so custom because everybody's at a different place with time and with money and experience. And so um, depending on the person, probably more so than the landscape, those small and slow solutions are actually going to be, when it comes to implementation, is going to be based on the experience, the money, and the time available for the person doing it. And so that design principle reminds me of that. It's really understanding project management is what it is. It's project management to install um, your permaculture design. The way Bill Mollison has said it is like, look, first just get it right outside your back door first, get that under control, and then move on a little bit further out of that. In essence, that's a simple way to basically say what I just said. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. I really like what you mentioned, that is to take responsibility for yourself and for your children and do it now. And of course, there are some ethical guidelines within permaculture. Then you got the principles and then the design. But taking responsibility is so key because it's so easy to blame others or blame your environment, your upbringing, just being a victim mentality. And then that really gives you
Yeah.
no control, because if you're blaming others, then you can't make a change, you can't improve whatever situation you're in. But if you take responsibility for yourself and for your children, now you have all the control. You could make the improvements, right? As long as you are humble and you are honest with yourself, then you're going to be able
Yeah,
to
man.
make the necessary changes. And in the sense of a homestead, then you're going to be able to properly design your dream property. And
So can I say, can I
of
respond a
course,
little bit to part of that, what you said? Uh, as I start to understand people more, which is a lifelong learning, and even myself, right? Because we change over time. I 100% will agree with you, but hear me out. I will 100% agree with you of don't have a victim mentality. But what I've noticed is if people really go through, like I was in Iraq not long ago, and I was with the Kurds. These people are getting like genocide is happening to them. They're doctors and lawyers in a friggin' UN refugee camp, right? How do you think they feel? And so it's like it's easy from the outside to say this is a big deal. This could also go down to being in a marriage too, right? Like it's the same ideas I'm talking about. But it's like hold on, it's quite. We skip a step. We skip a step when we say don't have victim mentality. That is true. Don't, because if that's your identity, it's going to run you into the ground. But there needs to be a time of acknowledgement of what happened, right? Something happened and it changed your life and it hurt, right? And and you might have been a victim, right? Or a woman who went through something terrible on the street, some man took advantage of her or something. That's a true like victim. Could she have done something potentially? So there is a time and a place where a victim is actually a victim, but living in that and I think that's the heart of what you're getting at. You can't stay there, but that time period after the the event or events, it's almost I don't want to say sacred. It's tender, and community. Hopefully, ideally, if you have people in your life, look around you and say that was hard. I see that, and then it's like you got a plant, you're growing a plant, and then your cat stepped on it, but it's still barely alive. Well, you take care of it a little bit until it gets back on its feet, and then it learns, and then the plant's like gets stronger, you know, and then its identity then is the plant and not the cow that stepped on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
definitely know where you're coming from, and I think that's where being able to listen to the other person's story, where they come from, having compassion, but even listening to our own story and looking back with gratitude on what we do have, because someone out there has it harder than us always, right? So being
Yeah.
grateful
Oh
for what we do have is so important. um,
yeah.
but yeah, going back to the using the 12 principles of permaculture to design your homestead or your farm, what are the essential items that you need to successfully plan your property?
Okay, I'm gonna take this. This is a question that can't be answered, so I'm gonna put some boundaries on it. I'm gonna take this question as in a homestead example, right? So for producing food and things like that, I would say I've never designed anything for anybody without a composting area. It doesn't matter your dietary needs. So you can be vegan, vegetarian, omnivore, carnivore, whatever you want to be. Compost pile is probably it is a heart of a living system. I couldn't see it not being there. Um, I could understand how people would not want to work with animals, but it just makes your life harder. So it's not a have to, but it makes your life easier when you start letting the animals do a lot of the work for you rather than you being the animal and doing all the work. I used to I used to live in Plano, Texas, in a suburban lot, and we started a demonstration site there. And when I first moved there, they wouldn't allow us to have chickens, which in the United States, where I'm from, I mean, that's the reason we came over here, is so we wouldn't have the government entities tell us what we could and couldn't do when it comes to living needs, like growing your food. So if any place is restricting you from like growing your food, that's probably about as fascist as you can get. So I had to be the animals. Right? Now, fortunately, it was a small like suburban plot, but I did all the work. Right? I turned all the soil. I turned all the compost. There's nothing really wrong with that on a small scale, but you're talking the moment you get even to an acre, doing it all by yourself becomes a lot of work, and uh, that's not ideal in permaculture. It's work. Don't get me wrong, especially at the beginning, but you hopefully have less and less work and more abundance as time goes on, um, and as you start getting more experience with your own system as well. Yeah.
Definitely. I really like that you mentioned the compost pile is a heart of a living system, and it's so true. It's so key, and it helps us close the loop, right? There is no waste. That's one of the principles, right? To produce no waste and to be able to reuse anything that we can reuse. So having a compost pile is so key. And definitely working with animals also such a key thing, even for someone that doesn't a vegetarian or a vegan. There's still many examples out there of people that have realized how having animals in their properties is such a benefit, my next question is still similar to the planning ahead steps, and is, what are the essential steps in conducting a successful site analysis?
Ah, ooh, okay. Let me add one other thing to the previous question, and then I'll jump here. A shelter, a human shelter, would be probably and that'll look different based on economics and where you are in the planet. Okay? If you're in the tropics, it literally may just be some bamboo poles and some roofing tin, like legit, right? If you're in some other places, you might be making adobe bricks. If you're in the developed world, it may look like a suburban house. So, um, but site analysis. What are the steps to site analysis? Okay, let me try to truncate this down. There's quite a lot there. For me, I broke it down to three main components, and then each of those components is filled with a lot of other components. So the first one is the people and what their goals and desires are. So for me, for example, this would be the easiest way to do this. I have a couple of goals. I'm a father, and so I really care about my kid, and so producing the resources for her and making sure that she gets to learn actual life skills is of really high importance to me. It feels like I'm doing my job as a father, not only providing but giving her the lessons needed on a more rural or even suburban environment, right? So, producing resources and experience for my family. Number one goal. Number two is the School of Permaculture's demonstration site. So having not only and those the top two goals can kind of run together, right? So I'm producing resources, but doing it in such a way that's easy to understand, and I can have people come over and look at it, and learn, ask questions. And then the tertiary one would be some money making venture. And as a little side note here, that's I think it was said at one time, unless it has four who's, you shouldn't sell it off of your property. And that's a deep thing to say because a lot of us want to get into permaculture and start selling what we're growing. But that's we unless you're really structured and really disciplined, that it then becomes a much higher priority. And we're back into agriculture, depleting the soil, and you're gonna run like it eventually turns us into famine, right? It's long to jump from that to famine in this short conversation is maybe hard to explain, but I could, and maybe another conversation. So that's part of the people systems, and then finding out, your time, your money, your experience, and can you get those to do what you need to do. So that's actually extremely important that nobody talks about when it comes to site analysis, and that's the people portion. Now, as you go over to the site, I mean, in permaculture design, you learn a lot of these. You're looking at environmental and climatic factors. So when it comes to average annual rainfall, where you are on the planet, are you near the equator, are you by the poles, are you close to a big sea of water? These are all regulating factors of what's going to happen in your growing systems. And so you got to figure out where you're at on the planet, and then the microclimates there too. Okay, you might be in the temperate climate, or in England or something like this, where it's beautifully, the weather is 100% for modern day agriculture, but then you're next to a tree belt where you don't get any sun, right? For most of the day. So so once you figure out the big stuff, then you got to figure out, well, where am I actually at, and what am I trying to do there? You're looking at obviously the topography, the contours, and this ties in together too. This is really how you divide land, how you subdivide land. It's not only contour, but the orientation it is to the sun and also the wind. And those things are ideally, if you were looking at it like any, you have two ridges and they come into a valley, like those two ridges where at the ridge, if rain falls here, one side of the water's going here and the other side is going here. So this area where the valley, where the micro watershed, that's really a subdivision. That should be how we subdivide land, right? Doing it like that instead of like, well, here's my 2 acres because it's on the highway. That has importance too. Don't get me wrong. Access is really important. But as far as inside the land, where you're doing it here. So not only is it subdivision, it that's the controlling factors of where the water goes in this little micro shed. So topography, contour, soil. You want to look at what the soil is already doing and what it can do. You're looking at vegetation, what's happening in your uh, local area that's native, that's been introduced, that is invasive or problems, and then also what you can plant there. And I wouldn't so much suggest you try to get on the edge of what could be planted there. Like I really can't plant limes where I'm at in Texas. I can in Houston, but not where I'm at in North Texas. So why am I going to add more complexity to my life trying to do that? You know what I mean? So go ahead and just plant what your climate in your area can grow. Um, and your wildlife, what wildlife species are there, and think a lot about the insects. You have way more of those than you do owls and birds, and all of it's important. But we also forget about the insects, and they are doing a massive amount of workload for you in your ecosystemically designed garden, and you want to attract them because they actually keep the pests away. But and I'm sure I'm missing a couple here, So, but that's quite a bit to look at while you're looking at site analysis. But don't forget to do the people questionnaire first, because so those two things lead to the third thing, right? You have to have the people for the site analysis, and then the site for the site analysis, and then your job once you learn permaculture, permaculture design, is to like it's I, I could only say what this is in metaphor. So one way to metaphor it is you're like a pastor who's marrying those two things together, or you're like a holistic doctor who then like doesn't just say, well, this is what we're going to do and prescribe medication. You're looking at everything carefully and then trying to integrate the things together with diversity of life and the principles and ethics of design through permaculture.
Thank you for that. Very awesome explanation on the essential steps, and of course, you are summarizing something that you could do an entire workshop on into a one question answer. So, of course, I really like how you put it. It makes it easy to understand. So you have the people portion. What are their goals, their desires, what's important to the people themselves who are going to develop this land, this property. But then you have to analyze the site itself. And then the last part, as a designer, I really like that metaphor, right? Integrating nature with the people, and working together, right? So I think that anybody listening could definitely review this answer and get a lot of knowledge from it. And you touched a little bit on what my next question is, which you mentioned, of course, the wind, the direction of the sun, the contour of a property, water, how water moves through the property. So there's two things in permaculture when it comes to design, which is planning your sectors and planning the zones. So I was hoping that you could explain a little bit to the listeners what does the concept of zones and sectors in permaculture design mean?
Thank you for asking me that question. You might have to remind me about zones in a minute. That's much simpler to explain. Sectors are not. After teaching a lot of students, I realized when I'm teaching design, that particular portion is very difficult to at least design. It may not be difficult to comprehend, but that maybe even the comprehension. And you know what? I may use this as feedback. Maybe I'm just really terrible at teaching this part of permaculture design. I don't know. But sectors are a simple way to look at it is what you've got a piece of land and what energies are coming into that piece of land and leaving that piece of land, right? And that's all a sector is energy coming onto and off of it. And then as you put the permaculture design principles to it and your design, it's like, well, then you ask yourself, well, what do you want to do with those energies? Do you want to detract them, like a wind break? You're trying to slow the wind down? Are you trying to speed them up? Are you trying to have them go onto the property quickly, then leave, go around the property? You're trying to like hold the energy onto the property as long as possible, like in most temperate climates would benefit that greatly. A dryland climate with things like swales and ponds and terracing, you're holding wind is one, your prevailing winds, but maybe even the seasonal winds. Where does the wind come from in the summer, or however many seasons you have, right? If you're over there and uh, if you're in the temperate, but you also have monsoon season, you got 5 seasons. If you're in the tropics, you may only have 2 seasons, wet and dry, right? Just depending on where you're at, what energies are coming onto it, and then you're like, okay, how do I work with that really well? And what you have to ask yourself, what is it that you want to do with it? Okay, that's. I hope I do it well. I think I get a little intimidated with that question on sectors because I've just seen so many students, and I mean a lot of students. I'm talking hundreds just stumble on over the sectors. So um, now, as far as zones are pretty easy to understand conceptually, but then you just have to without us actually showing zones on like a piece of paper or on a whiteboard. Just think of a bullseye, right? And so you have expanding circles, and you are in the center of that. You are the bullseye. Your house or wherever your dwelling is, the human dwelling, the human habitat. So if you're designing something, any element in your system that needs daily care should be right around that first circle around your habitat, right? And so like chicken, almost all the animals except for the large herbivores um, need to be kind of close to the dwelling so you can take care of them, right? Your greenhouse, you got baby trees you need to take care of. Like you don't need that half a mile away, right? So your zones are your proximity around your dwelling that 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 tell you the frequency of how many times daily you're going to use them. And so then you place a particular element in 1 through 5 zones. Some people say 0 to 5. Some people say double 0 to 5. Um, and that makes a lot of sense when it comes to design. And I can give you an example. I got a friend right now. He just bought 20 acres and he's going to move his business over there. So he needs to build a warehouse. He needs to build a house. He needs to subdivide the land for his friends and family are going to purchase some of the 20 acres from him. And so, you know, he's thinking about it through a practical lens without permaculture design at the moment, right? So adding the zonage there is going to benefit him greatly on being able to lay out his property better. And most people aren't thinking of the frequency of needing to visit certain elements, so just completely miss out. It's a lot of times it's economic decisions. I'm going to put a building close to the main road, so my driveway is a lot less money. And look, that's a really good reason to move your house closer to the road. Honestly, driveways are super expensive, and so the I think that gives you a generalization of covering zones and sectors, but um, it's really not that difficult to understand. It's just part of permaculture design. It's going to help you a lot in your land. Yeah.
No, I think you were able to paint a good picture for the listeners. And as you mentioned, the zones are a little bit easier to understand the theory or the concept behind them. And for sure, the sectors might be a little bit tougher to get a grasp on it. But how you mentioned is basically all the energies coming in and out of your land, and then using permaculture design principles to decide what you want to do with those energies, whether you want to completely stop them, or maybe you want to make use of them, increase them, decrease them. So it's a great tool, honestly, because we could use these energies for our advantages. So it's really another principle is the, or I don't know if it's a principle, but I know that the problem is the solution, right? So not looking at these energies sort of as a bad thing, but how can we take advantage of them? Now,
So hey, well, no, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
So that is a principle. The problem is a solution. It's one of the five of the Mollison. So there's multiple sets of principles in permaculture. The most famous, I think, are David Holmgren's 12 permaculture design principles. But inside the book, Permaculture Designer's Manual, that's riddled with. There's not just one section that says these are all the principles. They're riddled within all the chapters, right? And so a serious student like yourself, Andres, would look through that, and then you would synthesize that into a sheet and be like, these are the principles. So they're all important, and so that is a principle. There's also Birch's six principles of natural law, I believe is what it's called, and those are, for me, when I first read them, they just blew my mind. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. It's counterintuitive. So anyway, uh, I say that because somebody who takes it serious like you would like that to know that information. It's just not 12. There's multiple sets of principles. You just maybe just need to know where to look to find them. And so the problem is the solution is just golden. It's a golden principle.
Oh, no, I appreciate that because, of course, there's so much information out there. And I think that nowadays the problem is not that there is a lack of information, but it's being able to really digest the information that we have available, especially now with the internet. And not only that, but being able to apply it. So I think that these principles, the reason why we hear 12 is because it makes it easier to get into permaculture, right? Oh, it's only 12 of them. But as you mentioned, there's so many
Yeah,
other
yeah.
teachings and methods that could help a homestead flourish more than just the 12, right? So I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, that's good.
once you go through the site analysis, you identified all the sectors, you identified the elements within your zones, right? It's going to take you some study. You could hire a professional, or you could go to a class and then do it yourself. But then how do you go from planning the sectors and zones to actually drawing an actual site plan sketch?
So for clarity, this is drawing it by hand. Is that right?
Well, really, what tools do you recommend? Is it better to just draw by hand, or do you prefer digitally? What do you think is a good way to approach it?
Well, it's a hard question to answer straightforward because it just depends on the person. I've had students who, I had this one amazing lady come through, and she lives off grid in her 60s. She really needs to be teaching the class, right? But she had the hardest time turning in the work because she had to do it digitally. She doesn't know how to work digital programs, you know? and and then some people, feel like they're not artists, so like putting it on paper is hard for them. But I have an answer that still will, that's something to think about when you're talking about drawing or putting the design down. But there's still a good answer for you regardless if you do it by hand or with computer. And so what you do is you just start with what's called a base map, and your base map is what's already on the site. And so the easiest way to get a base map is you take a screenshot of some aerial photo, or you get an aerial photo. And ideally, the aerial photo that you get has a scale on it, right? So if you look at like um, Google Earth or Google Maps or something like that, typically in the bottom right hand corner, you see a little scale there, and that's very important. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's going to help you design a whole bunch. So you print that out with the scale, and then the trick is, well, how do you figure out the scale and design to it, right? Like that, there's a whole other deal there. Now, that's the easiest way, in my opinion, to get a base map, but it's not the easiest way to figure out the scale. The easiest way to figure out the scale is actually with grid paper. So, an 11 by 17 grid paper with the small squares on it. I think it's 4 or 5 per big square. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then you just denote a scale to each one of those squares. It could be 1 foot, it could be 5 foot, right? And then so every time you draw a line from one part of the square to the next, it's 1 foot, 5 foot, 10 foot, whatever it is, and it keeps it in scale for you. Um, and that's a pretty easy way to do it, right? So when you're ready to take that step, you have to figure out what's there first. You have to have a base map, and then you need to draw maps. Well, you don't need to. I would recommend drawing maps of some of the big things we talked about, like your contour map, or you can call that a water map. So a tree map is also good, where your trees are and where you, like when you're designing, if you are designing like a food forest or something, or an orchard for somebody else, or even yourself, oftentimes there's so much information that needs to be a map on its own. Like it would be difficult to look at that and figure out which each tree is. So you've got at least 30 or 300, and you're identifying all those in a legend, and then you're also trying to show where your contour dam is, and then also like your chicken system. It's just too much information, right? So breaking it, final designs are great. I like them, but you also need to kind of break it down. This is maybe a grazing map, a chicken system map, and um, and then also whatever's useful for what your needs are. So the final design gives you an exercise and permaculture design course, but if you do it for other people or yourself, the maps could change depending on your needs. Hey, hold on one second.
Thank you for being here. It's already been a lot of great information that you have shared, especially from the last question on sketching your design plan for your site. And it's so true that it really depends on the person and the resources available and their skills. And of course, if you do it digitally, it takes a lot more knowledge, but then you have the benefits of the scale, first of all, right? Because the software is going to give you that perfect scale, but also the layers, right? Depending on which most design tools that you use, whether it's, CAD, or even if you just go SketchUp, the simple ones, right? You could do layers. So then that way you could do the different maps, right? The contour, the water map, tree map, grazing map. So that's a very good insight, because for those that are not that don't have the software, they don't want to pay for them. But even the free softwares is still a learning curve on drawing on an iPad or tablet, or on a computer, and they don't want to go through that process, right? So doing it by hand is also an option, and knowing that putting everything on your final design, you can include absolutely everything, because then you're going to get cluttered. So one thing that I thought about is there's always contact paper, right? So you could make layers physically using contact paper, but of course that's going to take a lot of effort. So it's really up to you on how detailed you want to go. But I think it's great way of giving options. So that means that you could do it by hand or by software.
With that contact paper or vellum or whatever kind of see-through like tracing paper, that's typically how the architects used to do it, and the landscape architects, right? You have a base map, and then you would lay over vellum and then trace something out, and if you didn't like it, crumple it up and throw it away. Um, it just escaped me. It just escaped me. Ah, no, here it's back. I haven't done this, but I had a student do it, and I think it's uncanny, and it's amazing. So what she did is she printed out a base map, got the scale, and then she used construction paper to cut out the elements of what she wanted to add to the design. And then, so it's kind of like a bubble map. It wasn't super high detail, but it doesn't need to be. Like you can have a circle for a tree, like, like dark green is this kind of tree, a light green is this kind of tree. And then, so what that does though, it's almost like having a computer where you move the elements around, but now it's on construction paper, so it's tactile. So she was able just to move the construction cutouts around on top of her base map. And honestly, I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was brilliant. I haven't seen anybody else do it. It's just one student. I've been wanting to do it. I told a buddy of mine, Jeremy, about it, and he's like, "Let's go in business. Let's start a game. Let's start a not a game, but a product that you
Okay.
can buy for permaculture designers that come with already like cut out chicken coops and things like that." And I'm like, "Yeah, go for it, man. Yeah, it's a good idea." Yeah.
No, that makes it very interesting what you just mentioned. And you should probably try to get like a testimonial from her or something, or interview her to show it, because it really makes sense, right? To sort of have the same feature as a software, because in the design process, you might start out saying the chicken coop is going to be here, but once you have it all laid out, you might realize, oh, actually, I want it 10 feet to the east, or 20 feet to the west, or whatever. So when you're doing it by hand, being able to make those movements on the spot is a great tool to have. So that's an awesome tip, and I'm gonna try to implement it myself, because I am currently in the design process of my demonstration site. So I'll let you know how that goes. I'm gonna try to come up
If
with
you make
something.
if you make a video, let me know and I'll share it across the social media for the school. So I think it's great. I like I said, it's uncanny.
Definitely, and I think a lot of people might be intimidated by the design aspect. So there
Mm.
is a gap out there to show people how to do it, and that at the end of the day, it's really not that hard. It just takes some time and effort, like anything in life.
Yeah,
Now,
man.
uh,
Yeah.
one thing that is very famous related to permaculture and food forest is plant guilds. So I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit of what plant guilds are, and how can we leverage plant guilds and companion planting to create productive and resilient ecosystems.
Thank you for the question. So a plant guild is a small polyculture, not always, but typically around one main element. And usually that main element is a tree. So if you're trying to protect the tree from certain types of pests, you may grow alliums around the trunk and maybe around the drip line of the tree. Also, it to stop, so grasses and trees um, have different root systems, but they grasses need a more bacterially acidic dominated soil, where trees need the opposite, a more fungal and uh, alkaline soil. So that doesn't mean they can't coexist, and they do. But not only that, not only are their soils different, they're literally fighting each other at the chemical level, right? So the root systems are trying to make it less appealing for each other. So you may want to have a thing in your companion planting or your polyculture of this tree guild of preventing the grasses from getting too close to the trunk of the tree, right? So what you're doing is you're selecting plant and potentially animal or insect species and fungal species that aid the main element. Say it's a tree, right? So I gave you an example there of alliums and of something like canna lily and comfrey and lemongrass, which would potentially put a physical barrier from Bermuda or something coming close to the tree, but also a like a nitrogen fixing tree or nitrogen or a dy- or accumulator of minerals of some type, like something like tansy or comfrey is very famous. So you grow those around the tree as well, or some other legume, and then you chop that down and let it go back into the soil. So you're feeding the tree itself. So it's the polyculture of the plants aiding each other to help the benefit of the tree. When I first found out about this, it blew my mind. I had no idea that you can grow plants that feed other plants. Just that alone, just put me in my tracks. Okay, I got a question for you, and then I want to continue. Is that a good enough answer for a tree guild slash polyculture?
Yes, definitely. So keep going. Thank you for that.
Okay, I will tell you, and I may change later because we're human beings. Where my thought process has taken me on tree guilds or guilds in general is those are typically good for small spaces. If you want to do a food forest or you're doing something larger where it's not one tree, then you got to start thinking similar but different. Instead of looking at just a guild, start looking at truly an ecosystem. You need to start paying attention to like what's happening around you. So where I'm at in a temperate climate, I'm in an eco region called the Blackland Prairie. So one of the things that I do is you can research what native species of prairie forbs and grasses and um, herbs are growing here already, and even trees. And fortunately, we actually have there's a company, there's a couple of them now that sell seed packets of just these things, right? And then I design out the areas for production, and then I purposely design the ecosystemic areas, right? If you go to the School of Permaculture's website right now and then sign up for the email course that's free, it's permaculture gardening. I go over like what does it mean to design in an ecosystem, and I explain some of the benefits of that. But then what happens there is those explode faster because they're native to the area, and they bring in the beneficial like pollinators, but the beneficial predatory insects, the parasitoid insects that help clean your garden from the pest insects that you don't want on your plants, and a whole host of other things. They help you create compost. They create it's using the local diversity to a benefit of you, a benefit of not only you but of your production. It's going to actually help you grow more food and more resources and beautify the space. Again, that's beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I can see a lot of people like the straight lines. This does kind of look a little messy, but I don't know, it looks pretty gorgeous to me. So that's where I've evolved to thinking. I think it's good to have the understanding in a small kind of tree guild, but start thinking larger on how can you expand that into a larger area, and that's actually more realistic. Um, Very rarely has somebody ever asked me to plant one tree for them. You know, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we could start with one, but the hopes is to have multiple types of food producing plants and trees. So that's why we need to plan in the long run, and that's how I design before you start is so important, and also to seek help from those who have had success in the past, so that you don't make mistakes where you could have saved both money and time. Now, looking at your work in the School of Permaculture, I see that one way or one thing that you are trying to do with your work is to harmonize with natural systems for everyday living, right? Your house, your food, clean water, community, right? But then it also says using sustainable ancient wisdom to achieve that goal of harmonizing
Mm.
with natural systems. So I was just wondering, what do you mean by, or what sustainable ancient wisdom can we use to achieve these goals?
Andres, you are quite the listener, and I would say you're very good at this job. So thanks for bringing that up. Let me let you in, and anybody listening to this, in on a little secret of permaculture. There's almost nothing new in permaculture, and many of the strategies and techniques are just indigenous wisdom that has been going on for a long time, especially prior to chemical agriculture, and especially prior to the plow, right before the plow was made. And in the Western world, things are relatively new, but in general, in general. But you look over at the Eastern world, and there's a book like Farmers of 40 Centuries, so you go back of 4,000 years of you know the Koreans, the Japanese, and the Chinese using humanure, and family of four paying their rent with their feces and urine to sell it to the farmers, so the farmers could turn it into night soil and then grow food out of it to sell it back to the people. So this has been going on for a long time. Now that may gross some people out, but we're just so detached of how natural systems work. It looks gross only from the outside. So um, when I a lot when I talk about Bill Mollison, I have to smile because I never know what's a lie and what's not. But I do know one thing is he traveled to many countries, and he was able to do this kind of like what I would consider the last of the Mohicans, like his generation. Where today, like, look, even in I was in the Mesquite area. I remember it, of Honduras in like 2010 or something, and it's jungle and it's like indigenous cultures, and they have cell phones, man. And this was before, even like today everybody has a cell phone, but it was like even then, right? So we're talking like 60s, you know, and 70s. He's out there traveling the world and learning from grandma in the kitchen, man. Like he's got a book on ferment that you need to get, because that it's a synthesis of global ancient technique and strategy. That's gold. That's like that's survival for the human race. If we get hit by an asteroid or something and a small little bit of us survive, like what are you gonna do? Get on the computer and create me a friggin' model of a graphic design? No, there's not gonna be computers, man. You need the indigenous wisdom of how to live in the areas where you're at. And so 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 look, here's, I guess that can answer that question, but I want to riff on this, because I was just telling another friend, I traveled a lot. I'm not really traveling that much anymore, but if I was, and maybe when I don't have kids, you fly in to an area, and you just pack with a backpack on, right? And pack light, and you land. It's probably gonna be in a tourist area. You go to a developing country, you land, and then you get a taxi, and you say, "Hey, look, we just take me to the countryside," and this is going to take you as far as you can economically take you. but also where like the roads are no longer like safe for the car. Not safe because of like violence or crime, but it's like too rocky. There's no road, whatever. So you get out and you get his number because you may have to call him later, and you just start walking. And you know you're in the right place when typically what will happen is the kids start coming out and going like they know you're a stranger, right? They know you're a stranger. You're out in the countryside, and then you go, "Hey, would you bring your parents over here?" So you talk to the parents and be like, "Look, I want to stay in this country for like a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever. I don't want to stay at the hotel. Would you be willing to let me pay you to sleep maybe in an extra room or this and that?" So you're boosting the local economy, but then you say there's one catch because typically they're going to say yes unless you're just really strange. And with a smile, and they have nothing, right? They'll probably have like no money, so it's an economic boost for them. But you go, but you have to let me in every morning and every evening be in the kitchen with grandma so I can learn how she's cooking the food, right? And it's going to be her, and it's okay. She can verbally abuse me and tell me what to do, and I'll try to either stay out of the way or I'll just yes ma'am her the whole time. And that is a way. That's kind of what Bill did, right? It's kind of what did our generation. It's getting much more rare to find grandma who has that because grandma's didn't wasn't raised in the 30s, 40s, and 50s where you had to learn those things, right? So permaculture is a synthesis of a lot of these global techniques that there were airplanes which allowed Bill to fly around and gather these techniques and put them into a cohesive understanding of global design, right? Drylands, tropics, temperate climate. It's very unique that it's all kind of put together in one thing called permaculture. And no matter where you are on the planet, there's design systems and methods for that. Yeah.
Thank you. That was an awesome answer to that question of sustainable ancient wisdom. And it reminded me that there is nothing new under the sun, right? It's really just knowledge that has been lost through time. But in reality, since the beginning of time, people have been growing food. And from generation to generation, place to place, there's techniques and ways of growing food that through time people found it to be this is more efficient than this other type of way of doing it, right? So passing it down is really where we gain that wisdom, and that's so key, right? To wisdom is the principal thing, and therefore in all you're getting, get understanding, right? And get wisdom. So I really love that. But then you hit on one point that I hadn't really thought about or made the connection, and is that going from the garden to the kitchen, there's so much that we could learn there. So at least I focus more on how to grow it, or how to maximize yields, how to plant it, how to have the seed start, all the different ways and methods related to growing food. But you could also learn so much in the kitchen. So even just going to your mom or to your aunt or even your neighbor and
Yeah.
asking that person how they cook could really tell us so much about how we should grow food. So I'm really going to explore that in the next few weeks or months. I hadn't thought about it. So thank you for that, because you really
Yeah.
opened up a whole new uh, channel or avenue of learning. So definitely thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome. Glory to God, though, because I mean, really, you were going to get there anyhow. I mean, are you doing any kind of fermentation?
No, I'm not right now. I'm not doing fermentation, but I would love to get into. Well, I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
I- yesterday I don't know if it's considered fermentation, but I did put some oregano leaves in vinegar, and I'm gonna wait about 15 days and then take shots of that vinegar. See, it's supposed to have a bunch of medicinal benefits to it. So we'll see how that goes. That's all that I've been doing lately.
Well, real quick on that. So fermentation and food storage is huge. Imagine having no power. How are you going to store food, right? So fermentation is one of the ways that you can have fresh vet. You can create a fermented vegetables that are fresh to store for a year with no cooling, right? And so there's a vinegar fermentation, which most people in the States are aware of, but there's also um, a brine fermentation or oh man, the word skipping is it's there. It'll come. But basically, use water and salt is what it is, and that's ancient. You don't even need salt. You can just do water. And the vinegar, there's a type of fermentation that could be beneficial to you, but with the water and the salt, what happens is lactic bacteria or probiotics are built are grown in that, and so it can boost the nutrient load and be better for your stomach like by 60%. No other food methodology can store food and boost the bioavailability of nutrients than that. Now, you may not like the flavor of fermentation, but once you realize that's storing food without power, and it's like every food has a different probiotic bacteria that grows on it, then you get like, then you start going, well, I just need a little bit of this every day, like sauerkraut, right? Sauerkraut is cabbage or kimchi, cabbage in salt water. That's all it is, you know? So I would highly recommend looking into that because you're growing all the food, but why are you growing it? You know, I try to talk people out of selling food. I know it sounds like counterproductive, but it's not. Like you grow food for your family. You know, that's the main goal. Then with your surplus, then actually put your surplus back into the system. However, maybe sell a little bit or barter, but it's not going to yield you the results. And I only say this because this is my opinion. It's just the study of history. Right? Every civilization that's ever used agriculture, I'm not saying it is the only or the main reason that the society has collapsed, but every single one that's used agriculture is no longer here. And population growth and soil mineral depletion is a huge cause of population decline and famine, and it's terrible. And the only reason that we're lasting this long is because of the advent or the invent of chemical fertilizers. We went to war with um, saltpeter, you know, ammonium and different ways, and then finally we stopped making gun, or we continue making gunpowder, but we weren't at war with somebody, so we turned around and went to war on our soil, and we're using those same chemical production methods to obliterate our soil life. So that's made us sick and obese and unhealthy and having all types of mental illnesses, and weird things happen with atrazine is in the water supply everywhere in the United States, and 0.003 parts per billion turns a male frog into a female frog, and you're drinking that every time you drink water. You know, um, I would say that's not a natural process, and it couldn't be healthy. In men and women, it creates breast and testicular cancer. So maybe there's something that's out there that would be beneficial. Maybe that's more people just taking responsibility for producing the resources for their family. I don't know. Don't want to sound like I'm preaching.
No, you hit on a lot of great points, because that's why this topic of growing your own food and homesteading is so important, because it's not just about the growing of the food and just where you're going to live or the animals. It really affects all aspects of life. Going back to the fermentation, I'm definitely going to try to start, and how you mentioned the probiotics and then the different methods, definitely want to go get into that more. But then one thing that really stood out on this last thing that you mentioned is really the what is the reason why we're doing it? If is it for profit in the sense of monetary gain, just getting $1, and I'm gonna grow all these food so I could sell it? Is that really all that valuable at the end of the day? The surplus of food, how you say, you could put it back into your system and it would yield so much more returns than maybe just selling it. Or how you said, barter is a skill that has been all throughout history, and now most people don't even know how to barter, or what that means, or how to do it, or what to barter. They don't have anything to barter, right? So there are so many better ways of making use of your produce yield than just selling it. And it's really just changing the mindset, reprioritizing, and seeing really what is better in the long run, because it's not just for us and our community, but generations to come, right? So I really appreciate
Yeah, man.
that response. Now,
You're
I do
welcome.
have a couple of other questions, but I want to check on your time, be mindful of it. So if you're kind of running short on time, then we could sort of close it now. What do you think?
What time is it right now? 11:24? Or my time? Is it 24? I can't see my
Yeah,
clock.
yeah, it's
Is that what you're saying?
11:24. Yeah, over there.
Yeah. What are the questions? Tell me what they are
Well,
real quick.
definitely. Well, the first one is, where is it? Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm choosing the best one so that we could end it
No,
there.
all good. All good, man. Yeah. And I
Well,
could
I
say
was looking.
something.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention you had said something about bartering, and so there's an idea out there, um, and the originator of the idea, his name is escaping me at the moment, but it's called the eight forms of capital. And finance or money is one form, but there's other forms out there. That's worth learning, especially when it comes to permaculture and building community around you. Yeah.
Definitely, I would look that up for sure. The eight forms of capital. Well, the I found something in your website, and I just wondering what it means. And it's, what is an infinite garden?
Infinity Garden. Oh yeah. Um, so I am standing on the shoulders of Linda Woodrow with that, and so um, Linda Woodrow, and and I believe she's standing on the shoulders of Bill Mollison. And so what it is, it's a garden that you work with chickens, and you have like up to 12 different plots. And so if you do it in such a way where it makes the shape of the infinity sign, right? So you have the chicken coop, a mobile chicken coop in one plot, and they obliterate everything, right? They eat the pest seeds, they eat the pests. I'm sorry, the pest eggs. They eat the pests. They eat the weeds. They eat the weed seeds, and then they fertilize it, and they biologically sterilize it and make it ready to plant. And then you move them over to the next plot, and then behind them you plant, right? And then you just continue moving that around um, as the season allows, right? Some seasons maybe you only get three moves in very northern places, or very places that are close to the poles, but you can get full on in the subtropics, like it's never stops, right? And that's that. So think about what I'm saying for a second, right? You biologically sterilize and biologically fertilize your area. So there's no need to go get chemical fertilizer. It's a small unit that can work for your family and produce resources, right? And it's not traditional looking at all. I mean, it kind of can be, like, it's not like you could put rows and then like branch it off and like put like chicken netting up, for like make your own like plot, and then have them in the rows. But you might have to redo the rows every time because the chickens are going to knock it down, you know. But so it's utilizing chickens, specifically chickens in this way. You could figure out this system with ducks or rabbits or quail, something as well, and making it an infinite way to continue to grow food that's self fertilizing and self um, depesting and de-weeding in essence. So one, I will say there's a, probably 10 years old now, there's a video out there, I believe it's called Purple Pear Farm in New Zealand, and they are using this exact method I'm telling you with a mobile chicken coop that Linda Woodrow created, because they don't call them chickens there, they call them chooks. So it's a chook dome, and they're utilizing, and they do have a for sale, like a market farm, right? So it's not just for them. They bring their food to the market. So it'd be worth looking at Purple Pear Farms video on how they create their garden. And you could see it in its entirety right there. And so there's a lot of ways to design it: pendulum ways, infinity sign ways, clock ways. And so, but the idea, the root idea is still the same: of multiple plots, doing with the chicken, letting the chickens be the chicken, and then planting behind them as you continue moving it along for infinity.
That is awesome, and now I understand what you're talking about, and I'm sure that there is a, such a benefit on that application. But it also reminds me of mathematics, right? The infinity sign, and then how nature itself, the creator has put within nature his design, right? And then you got the infinity. And I'm sure that if you somehow design it that way, and then you take an aerial view of it, most likely it would have like the Fibonacci sequence on it with the golden ratio on it without you even trying.
Right.
But if you even try to design it to that level, most likely it would help the yields be even better. But again, that's on a different topic. Than we could make a whole episode just on how nature and mathematics work together, you know, and engineering
Yeah.
and science. So definitely very cool. Now, my last question that I do have is on one of the principles of permaculture, and is the concept of patterns, which I believe is very important when it comes to designing and understanding your site. So, can you explain a little bit what it means to design from patterns to details?
Oh, okay. So the principle. Okay, so that's you ending on a big topic there. Um, huh. So from designing from patterns to details. So a practical way to look at this is when you're taking your sector maps and you're looking at it and you're going, okay, um, the wind does X in January, and then in February it does something else, and then so you're looking at the energy that comes in, and that's the pattern. So your design details then need to, and you run that sector through the question: do we want to keep that energy here? Do we want to detract it? Do we want to hold on to it? We want to speed it up. So whatever the answer is, then that's how you get from a pattern to a detail. That's one way. That's one way to get from a pattern to a detail. Now the fun part of that is the identifications of patterns. Now they're becoming more and more well known, but the fascination that typically happens when a human starts learning that everything around them in nature is actually ordered. It's not a random series of events. Um, it has structure. It's like it's been designed by a mind or something, right? Um, and then you look at it and you're like, wow, I can fit inside of this with with something that will utilize this structure and make my resource production very strong. So I think that answered the question, but I want to end the answer with that is that alone, just learning about the patterns of nature is so fascinating. That alone is worth your ticket for whatever it is to sign up for a permaculture design course. It is mind expansion. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that. And as you mentioned, it becomes so awesome and interesting once you start learning all the different patterns within nature. And when you gain a little bit of, or even just the basics, then you could start using them to for your design and how you could grow food. So it's definitely so much information that one could learn, and taking a course like the one that you offer in the School of Permaculture would help people save a lot of time in that research and mistakes that you have, collected over the years. So definitely would recommend anybody that wants to save time and mistakes to, get into in that course. Now, to end it, if listeners only take away one thing from this podcast, what is the most important piece of advice you will give to someone new to growing their own food or homesteading?
Get out there and do it. And then don't spend, go out there and do it and realize you're going to have to redo it if you haven't took some time to study. So don't spend too much money, but go ahead and just dive in. And then start learning either through mistakes, which will take you your whole life, or get an instructor who can help you put everything together for you and save you time and money and energy. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for that, man. Finding that balance between how much risk to take at first and how much can I seek help from others. So it's really depending on the person, knowing your own context, and knowing the value of seeking help, right? It's very important and could save us not only time and mistakes, but a lot of money. And just for
Yeah.
anybody that wants to learn more about the School of Permaculture and get in contact with you, how can people get in contact with you, follow your journey, and do you have any upcoming projects or events that you like to invite people to?
Yeah, it's schoolofpermaculture.com is the website, and email comes to the school is learn at schoolofpermaculture.com. And I believe in March we're trying to put it together right now. We actually haven't done an in-person permaculture design course since COVID. It's been all online. So if you're local to the North Texas area, doing a permaculture design course sometime starting in March, and it will last for 6 months, like one weekend a month for 6 months, making it available to people who have 9 to 5s, who want to transition from city life maybe. And that's how you can find it. Schoolofpermaculture.com. And Andres, man, just thank you for asking me to do this. I really appreciate it. It's been a great experience with you, and um, you know, thank you for even taking the time and thinking about me to be on your podcast. Yeah, man. Yeah.
Hey, Nicholas, I thank you again for your time today. A lot of knowledge shared that can help many people. So I really appreciate it. And looking forward to having you back in the show in the future so we could, dive into some other topics or getting more in depth with things that we already, talked